The Birth of Vrishakethu. Uruvi did not hear from Karna for a long time after his visit. Kunti's warning words kept resonating in her mind, and all she wanted to do was run back into Karna's comforting arms. But she knew she could not, she would not. The baby was due any moment, and as she waited for the day her child would be born, her thoughts kept drifting to the man she loved. She pined for him, and even though she was still distressed about what he had done, she desperately hoped she had not lost him. This tussle between her heart and mind never seemed to end. Karna did not write to her, and neither did she. It was as if an invisible, impenetrable wall had divided them. All she got to know through Vrishali's letters was that Karna stayed away from his home, spending weeks at a stretch on the battlefield. After the Pandavas left for their exile in the forest, Karna had taken upon himself the duty of expanding Duryodhana's empire in his mission to declare him the emperor of the world. Commanding a huge army marching to different parts of the country, Karna subjugated many kings and made them swear allegiance to Duryodhana as the king of Hastinapur, or forced them to meet his army in combat. Karna won all the battles easily. And in this military blitzkrieg, he, as the mightiest warrior, forced many rulers and clans to surrender: the Vangas, the Nishadas, the Kalingas, the Vatsas, the Ashmakas, the Rishikas, the Kambohas, the Shakas, the Kekayas, the Avantias, the Gandharas, the Madrakas, the Trigardas, the Tanganas, the Panchals, the Vidihas, the Sumas, the Malekas, and even the ferocious forest tribes. Pukia remained vulnerable, and Uruvi wondered what her father would do if Karna attacked his kingdom. But she knew he would not. When the time for the birth of her baby arrived, she was as prepared as a soldier is ready for war. Late at night, she woke up with a sharp pain stabbing her body. She was trembling as she called out for her mother, who came into her room immediately. Her last coherent thought was that their baby had arrived in good time. He was as punctual as his father. The baby was born early in the morning, before dawn broke into the light of another day. By mid-afternoon the baby had 3 early visitors. Kunti apologized profusely for not coming in earlier. And then, the baby's father arrived. He was warmly greeted by a visibly pleased Queen Shubhra and an overjoyed King Vibhusha. "It's a boy." Queen Shubhra smiled with delight. "Congratulations, son, you have another boy." Karna stood stiff and silent, yet his impatient eyes kept wandering towards his wife's room. For a moment he let himself relax, and Uruvi's parents could see his joy. He asked huskily, "He was born with the sunrise, so he ought to be lucky. How's Uruvi?" "Doing as well as can be expected," his mother-in-law replied with a huge smile. She was well prepared. Her labor pains began in the middle of the night, and by dawn, it was all over. Radha, who had accompanied Karna, smiled quietly at her son's evident eagerness to see his child. "You are behaving as if it's your firstborn, Radhaya." She smiled. "He is our first child," Karna murmured. "The first child always has an amazing effect on one. May I meet her?" He looked appealingly at his mother-in-law. "If she doesn't want to see me, it's fine," he added hastily. "Don't let me upset her. But I would like to hold my baby for just a moment. She's awake, and I think she wants to meet you. She wants to show you the baby herself. Come. Let's go meet her." Kunti gave him a long, lingering look and gently took him by his hand to lead him to Uruvi's room. She pushed him inside, letting go of his hand reluctantly. Karna turned and bowed to her. "Go, son. Go in. Meet your child. And your wife. Bless you," she murmured softly, her eyes tender with mixed emotions. As Karna stumbled into the chamber, he was arrested by the sight of his wife, smiling slightly, nestling the baby closely in her arms. He had imagined them so often like this that it was a warm, familiar sight. It was a sublime vision, a transcendent moment he knew he would cherish till the last day of his life. She wore only a single sari, and she looked wan. Her long hair, disheveled and damp, clung to her head and hung down her shoulders in cascading wisps. She was deathly white, but the moment she saw him, he could see the color seeping into her cheeks. Her soft lips broke into a small smile. Then Karna held the baby in his arms, feeling an indescribable happiness. His son was beautiful, huddled snugly in his strong arms, his head already covered with soft, golden hair and his huge dark eyes gleaming softly. "He has a lot of hair and it's as fair as yours," Uruvi whispered, her eyes sparkling brightly. "But his eyes are like yours, dark and oh, so very huge." He kissed the baby's broad forehead. "He'll be just like his father," she said warmly. No, he won't," Karna pronounced quietly. "I don't want him to be like me. Ever. I wouldn't say I am a very good role model. Let him chalk out a better path for himself. Have you thought of any name for him?" She shook her head, lowering her eyes to hide her turbulent feelings. He was sitting so close to her that she could inhale his scent, could feel the strength of his body. She wanted to touch him, wanted to feel his arms around her, but that wall between them was still there. Her pitiless words, once uttered so calmly, still kept them apart. "Then we shall ask the family priest to choose the best name according to his horoscope." Karna leaned over smoothly and returned the baby to her. "You have always given me more than I can ever ask for. I hope I deserve him," he said abruptly. "You are a father any son would be proud to have. And is your husband, Uruvi?" he pressed. "When can I be your husband again? Can you ever forgive me? Please tell me. Tell me how I can make you respect me, love me as you once did." "I do love you," she said tenderly. "Let me happily remember the time when we were together. Let me have that forever." In his silence, he assented. Karna stayed on for a few more days till the naming ceremony of the baby. King Vibhusha spared no effort to make the ceremony memorable, with music, dancing and the choicest of eats for the guests who came in hundreds. The baby was named Vrishakethu and he seemed rather happy about his name as he chortled away all through the ceremony conducted by chanting priests. "He's a good child," Queen Shubhra stroked the soft cheek of her first grandchild. "Usually, it's either the baby or the mother who gets cranky at such occasions. He seems to be so accommodating. He's just like Radheya," gushed Radha, joining them to gaze adoringly at her grandson. "He never gave me trouble, even as a baby. It was as if he was born to be wise and considerate. This one will be the same." That's what every parent hopes for, the best for their child. Sadly, very few children realize that parents always keep their best interests in mind. "They would never wish harm for their child, would they?" said Queen Shubhra. Uruvi agreed, recalling her mother's concealed concern, which she had masked so magnificently during the Swayamvara, and how vehemently she had opposed her marriage to Karna. Now that Uruvi had become a mother herself, she felt a strange, unaccustomed affinity with her mother. Understanding why her mother had reacted as she did, it was only because she wanted the best for her daughter. Uruvi was glad she had her mother close to her, and felt a small pang at the thought of leaving her soon. When it was time to leave Pukia and return home to Karna, Uruvi was ready with a smile and a wise gleam in her eyes. Holding her baby close, she waved to her parents and turned away resolutely. Her father watched her walk to the chariot with her husband and her baby. The air was still mild and spring-like, and above the palace towers, small white clouds sailed leisurely in a sheer blue sky. She held herself straight. She was still slim and lovely, and he could not help staring at his child, who had become a woman now. He thought that it would not occur to anyone that his daughter was putting up a brave front. She carried herself proudly, with her head held high, a tiny smile on her lips hiding a broken heart. Yet, he knew, some part of her loved and hoped still. Days went slowly by, stretching into weeks. The nights were achingly longer. Each evening, Karna retired to his room and Uruvi slept in her huge bed alone and miserable, yet proud and unyielding. Women, Uruvi thought wryly, could conceal their feelings so wonderfully. No one could have guessed what she was going through. Karna was distant towards her, he looked strained and in his eyes was a hungry, haunted look. Uruvi tried to ease the tension as best as she could but constantly found herself torn between longing and despair. She was withdrawn when he was with her, her vivaciousness subdued, but they played chess together, chatted and discussed various topics. The difference was that they rarely laughed together as they once did. The family did not seem to notice any change in their relationship. Even if they did, they kept a discreet silence, hoping the cloud would soon pass. "She'll come around one day," Radha assured her husband. "She loves him too much and he cannot survive without her. You saw the state he was in when she went to Pukia. He had gone to pieces. Give her time. The baby will help to put everything right." Uruvi engrossed herself in the baby to distract herself from thoughts of Karna. She refrained from bringing up any contentious issue and avoided talking about Duryodhana. She never spoke to Karna, except when he questioned her directly, and often retired to her own room quietly. But Karna noticed that she was in radiant health. There was a soft glow about her, a healthy color in her cheeks, and in Karna's eyes, she never looked more beautiful, with the baby cradled in the crook of her arm as she murmured softly to him. He was filled with love whenever he gazed at her. She averted her eyes but not before he saw the longing lingering in them. Oh, she was proud and still so fiercely belligerent. Each time he left home for the battlefield, he couldn't forget that look in her eyes and he remained hopeful that she would come back to him as the bride she once was. One morning, on one of the many days Karna was away, Uruvi met Vrishali as she rushed up the stairs. "Careful, dear, you need to be more cautious," she greeted Uruvi with a small smile. "You are still not very strong." Uruvi promptly stopped. "Thanks, I keep forgetting that." She laughed self-consciously. As is often the case, Vrishali said dryly and Uruvi detected a subtle undercurrent in her words. "But as a mother now, you will have to be less impulsive and much more responsible. Are you tired?" she asked, rounding off her disapproval with a gesture of concern. Uruvi stared at her. She had never got down to knowing this woman at all. She was cold yet polite, distant yet solicitous, greeting her but never making her feel welcome. Uruvi felt a frisson of irritation rise within her but she calmly asked instead, "Any news of Karna?" "He's gone to the battlefield again," Vrishali sighed. "Ever since the Pandavas went into exile, Radheya has rarely been in Anga. Perhaps since you left, he prefers to stay away from home." Vrishali almost sounded accusing. "He is busy with his campaign for Duryodhana, collecting as many crowns for him as he can." Uruvi heard the slight sneer in her voice. "He and Shona went off 3 weeks ago but should be back in a day or two," she said and began to move away. "He's gone with Shona." Uruvi sounded surprised. "Our whole family is fighting for the Kuras these days. Shona, Vrishasena, Shatrunjaya, Dvi Pada and Sushina are Radheya's little army for his dear friend. Thankfully, Satyasena, Chitrasena and Susharma are too young to be on the battlefield," Vrishali said bitterly, resentment lacing her words. "An entire full-blooded family is fighting somebody else's war." Feeling weary, Uruvi suddenly wanted to sit down. "Let's go to my room," she suggested, "or I'll have to sit on the steps." "Yes, I was coming upstairs to see Vrishakethu," Vrishali smiled in gentle agreement. It was the first time Vrishali had ever stepped into her chamber. Uruvi peered into the cradle. The baby was fast asleep so she continued talking to Vrishali. "Has the situation worsened so much?" Uruvi asked almost apologetically, but she already knew the answer. All the men in the family were on the battlefield and that is how it would be from now on. Karna saw himself as a pioneer, a crusader for the Kuru family, and his sons, who were young and enthusiastic, had caught on to their father's sense of purpose in expanding the frontiers of the Kuru kingdom. They and Shona were too devoted to Karna to disobey him. I have already lost one son, my Sudama, needlessly. Vrishali's usually serene face was creased with pain. We haven't yet recovered from that tragedy at Draupadi's Swayamvara, but Draupadi has managed to cast her spell again. Vrishali looked uncharacteristically virulent. She and that wretched Kuru prince, Duryodhana. Radheya will never free himself from Duryodhana. He is with the Kauravas, but he is not like them, and they know this well. They fooled him into thinking the dice game was without any great stakes. Knowing full well that Radheya was against the dice game right from the beginning, Duryodhana and Shakuni had warned Dushasana not to allow Radheya to enter the Kuru Raj Sabha when the game was on. But somehow Radheya managed to get in, and clearly, on that day, he was the wrong man in the wrong place. Uruvi blanched. She did not want to hear of the episode again. Blood rushed to her head and her breathing oppressed her. Oh, that Panchala princess has cast a spell on him since her Swayamvara. Vrishali fumed, ignoring Uruvi's discomfiture. She humiliated him publicly and we lost our son because of her. I know that when he saw her vulnerable at the Raj Sabha, it brought all those terrible memories back and he got a chance to get even with her. Calling her a whore because she had 5 husbands was right, in a way, but morally, he lost out, didn't he? She looked pointedly at Uruvi, prompting her to reply. Uruvi did not bother to answer. She had no intention of getting into a debate on Karna, Draupadi and herself. Vrishali seemed to be enjoying her awkwardness for some strange reason. Despite all his righteousness, Radheya could not bring himself to forgive that woman. The fact that he refused to help her in her moment of need shows the depth of his resentment and loathing. She remarked with malice, a quality no one would have attributed to the mild-mannered Vrishali. Did he discuss the incident with you? Uruvi asked quietly. No. Karna doesn't ever talk about what bothers him, he prefers bottling it all up. Vrishali shook her head sadly. I cannot believe he is the same man whom I married so many years ago. He seems to have changed so much. Whether it's a sign of corruption or maturity is something I fail to understand. Vrishali paused for an instant, fingering the Mangalsutra hanging around her slender neck. Radheya has only one measure of right and wrong, his blind loyalty to Duryodhana in any situation. Even when he is wrong, Radheya supports him, that's all that matters to him, fully realizing that it will be his downfall one day. Truth and lies, right and wrong are all a matter of perception. Radheya believes he is right in standing up for his friend, we think he is wrong and his devotion is misplaced because it is for a man who has no integrity. He believes what happened at the Kuru Hall was wrong, but he eventually ended up being part of it and now he berates himself silently, she sighed. Vrishali spoke calmly, measuring each word with a certain nonchalance. She persisted in the same vein, I have known him since both of us were very young and, over the years, I have seen him changing, often for the better, sometimes for the worse. I have watched him slowly get sullied. That decadent Kuru prince tried to get him into the habit of drinking, womanizing and gambling, but Radheya, after his initial surrender, retraced his steps fast enough to get back on his feet again. Since then he has been part of Duryodhana's coterie, yet his heart is not in it. I can see he's getting sucked into the palace intrigues as well. I guess I lost him a long time ago. Vrishali sounded wistful. First I lost him to Duryodhana, then to Draupadi. Draupadi? Uruvi asked sharply. Haven't you realized it yet, dear? He is utterly fascinated by her and the fact that she rejected him goads him into further madness. It is a horrible love-hate relationship. You wonder whether he loves to hate her or hates to love her. What a crazily spinning world I'm living in, Uruvi screamed silently. Here I am so completely in love with a man obsessed with another woman, a woman who loves him too, with the same untamed passion. She glanced at Vrishali, hoping desperately that she was wrong. Then Uruvi heard her say, and finally, I lost him to you. There was a long, deliberate pause, forcing Uruvi to feel uncomfortable. Vrishali looked at her squarely, her eyes clear, condemning her openly. He has gone so far away that he is not mine anymore. He stopped coming to my chamber a long time ago. Why are you turning crimson, Uruvi? Asked Vrishali with evident amusement at her rival's unease. Seriously, I was jealous of you once, but no longer. I know where I stand. And that's certainly not coming between you lovebirds. I knew I had to step back, and watch you being his wife and lover, which was a difficult task at first. She gave a humorless laugh. You are realizing it finally, aren't you, that it is rather hard being Radhaya's wife? Uruvi looked back at her thoughtfully. Who has had an easy time, Vrishali? Ask my mother or ask our mother-in-law. Bhanumati, too, knows it is not easy being Duryodhana's wife. Draupadi and Subhadra or even Queen Gandhari and Kunti have faced difficult times in their marriages. We all have married men so complex, and we can do nothing but watch helplessly. That is what is so frustrating. Cried Uruvi violently. Vrishali, Karna's worthiness and ability are not enough, they have to be accompanied by wise decisions too. He is the bravest, the most kind, the most wonderful man we know, but perhaps he is making too many misjudgments and moral errors. Yes, he is, and I can't ignore that any longer. Vrishali replied. Living in false hope and illusory expectations is not optimism, Uruvi. It is living in denial. Perhaps I am no longer in love with the man Radhaya is today, she trailed off unhappily. But I still am, Uruvi thought with despair. And I can't let go of him. She knew she loved him to distraction. Was he her weakness? Oh, what would I do to bring back the old days at Champanagari where we first met and married? Cried Vrishali in sudden frustration. You rushed to Pukia when you couldn't handle the situation here, Uruvi. Why? Because you wanted to go back to your roots to make sense of your life, to deal with the madness engulfing all of us. There comes a time when we need to make sense of our being, of what we are. You are lucky to have your Pukia. The older woman was crying and she buried her face in her hands to muffle her sobs. No, no dear, all is not lost. We have him, we love him, and that is our greatest blessing. Uruvi tried to reassure the distressed woman, moved by the appeal in Vrishali's cry. That's because he is a man who hungers for social respect. He is seeking his identity, which has been denied to him. He wants to be known as a worthy warrior. At what cost, Uruvi? She flashed fiercely. He is sacrificing himself and his family to a selfish society that has not hesitated to remind him every now and then of his low birth and his inferiority. It kills me, it's killing him, and it will eventually destroy our entire family. Vrishali looked pointedly at the rocking cradle. Save your child from this meaninglessness, Uruvi. Would it make any difference? Uruvi shrugged her shoulders. In spite of having us, his children, and a family that loves him so unconditionally, Karna is so remote. I always thought a family was a refuge in a merciless world, but does it hold true for Karna? He is always so alone, ever unfulfilled, constantly haunted by the unresolved ambiguity of his true self. Till he finds it, he will remain a restless soul, searching for his ultimate truth. But by then, it might be too late, for him, for all of us. It is too late for him, isn't it, Uruvi? She asked gently. You have not forgiven him for that one fault of his. Vrishali was forcing her to respond. Uruvi got up impatiently, as if to shake off her angry thoughts. I can't make myself forget that it was Karna who instigated the Kauravas to disrobe Draupadi in court. Uruvi's voice trembled as her pain struggled with shame. After the Pandavas lost everything, their kingdom, their own freedom, their queen in the game of dice, it was Karna who said she was nothing less than a whore. It was his words that prompted Dushasana to start pulling off her clothes. Until Karna uttered the unspeakable, no one in the Raj Sabha had dared to think of stripping Draupadi. It's so horrible, brutally. As a woman, can't you feel the pain and humiliation of Draupadi? And what I cannot accept is that it was our husband who did that to her. Yes, he spoke out of hurt and anger. But can't you see his repentance, Uruvi? Retorted Vrishali. The shock of your flight broke him. He asked me to intercede for him, to implore you to return. I refused as I believe what's between the two of you is too private. And so, he went to Pukia to get you back. But you did not relent and he returned the very same day. Since then, he's been occupied with Duryodhana and his military plans. His loneliness is intolerable to him, and like a driven man, he's running away from home and all of us, to drown himself in his work and despair. He's willing to promise you anything, hasn't he abased himself enough, Uruvi? I have grown up with his faults and I love him in spite of those. I have forgiven him 1,000 times over, because each time he changed. I learned that loving is giving. And forgiving. I only hope that by the time you do it, it is not too late. For you and for him.